prison! This is prison! This is prison! This is prison!
These were the shocking scenes from Tenby just 2 days ago. Now, you won't have seen any of this on mainstream television because they don't cover these stories, but remember, I've been covering on these YouTube films army camps being filled up with those crossing the channel illegally. We started off in Shorncliffe in Kent. One of the barracks here, the Napier Barracks, well, that is currently undergoing a big refit because later on this week, it won't be the Ministry of Defence that owns the Napier Barracks here at Shorncliffe, it'll be the Home Office. Pinalley Camp in Tenby in West Wales was the second, and just before Christmas I visited Barton Stacey in Hampshire. Rob, you put me in touch with this, you're a local guy.
Correct.
What have we got here?
Basically, this is the new site where 500 asylum seekers will be housed temporarily if it all gets voted through. Basically, they say temporarily, but like I say, the average claim I think takes about 6 months.
And then there's an appeals process where they're going to build accommodation for about 500 people who've illegally come to Britain and who were put into camps or into 4-star hotels or into private accommodation while they wait for their asylum claim to be rejected, as it will be in almost all of the cases. But let's put this into a broader context. Taking back control of our borders. Do you remember that? The 23rd of June, 2016, millions of you went out and voted for us to get back proper border controls so that we could decide who came into Britain and on what terms. Well, how do we think the government's doing? Well, we now have an end to all the travel corridors, and you can't get into this country unless you've been tested for coronavirus and then, even then, go into 10-day quarantine. Not before time. I remember I was ranting about this last year on the day that Lombardy in northern Italy declared an emergency. On that very day, so bad was their COVID crisis, 17 flights came in from Milan's Malpensa airport.
Philip, why do you think, and you're involved in the industry, I'm not, why are we being so lax about people that are coming in from areas with a very, very high rate of coronavirus?
So it's taken the government a very long time to get a grip of who's coming into Britain, and it was 18 million people came into the country before there were any restrictions of any kind. So we literally did import this virus into the country. All right, they've taken action. That's a good thing. I suspect that it's rather late. But even then, whilst this may be applying to flights coming into the country, what about what goes on over and under the Channel Tunnel? Well, yesterday was day one of the ending of these corridors and the insistence on new rules. And firsthand, I got accounts of a large number of people yesterday coming into the country in big vans, even in small coaches, coming in groups of 10 to 20 specifically from Romania, is the information I've got. Now, quite why such groups were coming in after the deadline had expired, and whether any of them were asked to produce evidence of a test, of an address they were going on to, I don't have the answers, but it does seem very, very odd. So you can make it tough to fly into the country, but if you want to get into a coach or a van and come through the Channel Tunnel, it would appear that is still far too easy. And what an irony. What an irony it's been over the last few weeks. To begin with, the French making it very difficult for us to get into France, us now ending the travel corridor. So, Britain closed off. They're the headlines that we saw in the newspapers yesterday. And yet, see this footage. This was the early hours of yesterday morning in Dover. So perhaps the easiest way to come into the UK is to hire or steal an inflatable rib or pay a criminal gang and come across the channel because that is still open for business. So far this year, it's about 250 that have come so far this year. But remember, It's January, it's cold, we've got some big gales coming next week, so the numbers are not that big. So are we, despite all the promises that have been made, are we actually taking back control of our borders? As I say, in the COVID pandemic, we have been woefully, lamentably late in doing anything. And when it comes to illegal immigration into Britain, well, bear this in mind. We're now housing 60,000 people. 60,000 people we're housing. And those that have seen my previous YouTube films know I visited some of the army camps, but I visited also many of the 4-star hotels with their big flat screen TVs. And it would appear that one of the reasons for the protest in Tenby is they don't like the conditions. You know, they say they're entitled to a more normal life. Well, they're only entitled to it if they're here legally or if their claim for refugee status is successful. But the Home Office Committee themselves say that 81% of those that come into the country don't even qualify for asylum because they've come already from a safe country and they don't fulfill the criteria. So let's see what happens, because we've been promised all the way through this that once Brexit was completed, this problem of illegal immigration into Britain would end. Well, is it going to end? So far, we have no provision whatsoever with France to return anybody that is coming illegally across the Channel. And it seems to me that the French are simply just not going to cooperate. So it's going to take a very tough Home Secretary, and certainly Priti Patel talks tough, but it's going to take a very tough Home Secretary backed by a Prime Minister, backed by a cabinet to say, if you come here via these means, we're going to do what the Australians did. We're going to turn you around and send you back to where you came from. I could be wrong, but it seems to me this problem isn't going away. Another 8,400 last year came across the Channel. And that's apart from those that come in, on the back of lorries, in the roof boxes of cars, or whatever else it may be. I don't think we're taking back control of our borders. I don't think at this moment in time we're actually holding faith with those people in this country, and it was 17.4 million people. And sure, borders and immigration weren't the only issue, but they were in many ways the most important part of that loss of control that we voted in the referendum to get back. And I think the government have really got to pull their socks up on this, because, when you look at Conservative voters in this country, or certainly those from the election last year, over 90% of them think this issue matters and think something should be done. The only optimistic note is we are proceeding with vaccinations. 250,000 conducted yesterday, and compare that to our friends in the European Union who took a long time to make a decision, and we're about 5 times by percentage the rate of that in France and Germany. So I'll be praiseworthy where it's right to be. But those shocking scenes in Tenby a couple of days ago, and I feel very sorry for people living there, because it's clearly a constant worry to them, because that camp is open and this is the kind of behaviour that we've seen. Those shocking scenes in Tenby will continue and get worse until we get a grip. Let's take back control of our borders.